to another Turnheads event where we talk about career pathways, employability skills, and how to flourish in your first few years in the creative industries. So if you're looking for a first job in the industry, or you're here to support or employ those who are, then the Turnheads platform is for you. My name's Sam, I'm the founder of Turnheads, and we're here today to talk about the things that you need to know as a junior digital designer with our lovely special guest, Andrea Donna. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Andrea to introduce himself and to share his tips from his career journey so far. Over to you, Andrea.
Great, thank you very much. So let me share my screen. All right. There you go. You should be able to see the first slide, hopefully. All right, so my name is Andrea, and I'm a digital design lead at a B2B company called Velocity Partners. I'm based in London, and Velocity Partner is also based in London, in lovely Richmond, which is a really nice area, actually. Really good park, with weirdly, like they have deers as well there. So it's anyway. So I work for Velocity Partners, and I would like to tell you a bit more about me, what I do in my day-to-day job as well. So yeah, as I said, I work with Velocity Partners, B2B agency. So that means business to business. And there are three things that I really love in my life. So one is ABBA, of course. Second one is pizza, because I'm Italian, and video games in general. I really like video games. But what do I do when I'm not playing video games, when I'm not listening to ABBA or like eating a pizza? My job is actually quite varied. I think I'm quite lucky, to be honest, because I usually get involved in a lot of digital branding projects. Websites, web design, of course, complain a lot with my colleagues. I create a lot of digital marketing materials, like promotional materials for, say, LinkedIn or other social channels. Managed a digital design team, which is quite an interesting task, and take care of the internal training. So, and by that I mean making sure that we all know how to use like the main software like Photoshop, Illustrator, Figma, and how to use them effectively when we design well, the branding, but when we design a website as well. And we use Figma daily, basically. And in terms of digital branding, I think that's actually quite an interesting distinction. When I was thinking about, before I joined Velocity, I thought, well, branding is branding. I mean, what's the difference between digital and print branding? They're the same. But I think that there are quite a few differences. The main one is that digital brandings are brandings that will probably live exclusively online. So on a website, on social channels, and the choice we make are completely different, because in terms of colors, in terms of fonts and things like that, we have to consider a lot of different things, because things are looking different. When you print something on a gigantic poster, it's not going to look as good on your small Instagram post. So a lot of things to think about when we design a brand for print. And here you can see like a few samples of projects that I've worked on. Again, I've tried to include a few different things here. So you can see like some websites, some samples of other brand designs for print, for example. This is something that I designed a few years ago, but I also enjoy illustrations, animations, logo design. That's something that I really enjoy designing logos, and apps in general. So I have quite a broad kind of skill set, but Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But before we actually talk about that, I would like to ask you if you know what's the difference between a UX designer, a UI designer, and a digital designer. Now, I actually put together, well, a slide, but I would first hear, I would like to hear if you guys have a, I don't know, just an opinion about like, oh, what's the difference between a UI UX designer and UI designer, for example, and what is even a digital designer? And am I able to see the chat? I don't know.
Yeah, there should be a button at the bottom, I think.
Oh,
We've had a few responses. So
there you go.
Adriana says, I know the difference between a UI and a UX designer, but not a digital designer.
Good.
And then Emily is saying UI is focused on the visual.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And it actually took me a while to really understand what's the difference between the three. Also because sometimes people merge UX and UI, but really when we talk about the two things, they're actually quite distinct. And let's see, Nicole said UX is the how, UI is the pretty visuals. Yes, that's good. That's correct. So when I have to explain the difference between the three, I generally try to associate that to a restaurant. I think that's probably the easiest way to explain the difference between UX, UI, and digital. So if we think about a restaurant and we think about the kitchen in the restaurant, I would say that the head chef is the UX designer. So that's the person that does a lot of background work. They focus on the research, understand what people like and dislike, and what are the things that generally work best. They focus on data, and they don't necessarily care about the nice designs. And I think, you know, if you think about a kitchen, of course, you have the head chef who makes sure he's the person who creates the menu, and that's the person who defines the kind of dishes the restaurants will serve based on what people like and dislike. It's not just a matter of what the person, the head chef in this case, likes. And then we have the UI designer, which is, well, it's important also to mention that UX designers start from research, analysis, data analysis, and they usually stop at wireframes. So they define the layout and the flow of the website and the apps. While the UI designer is basically the person who picks up the work after the UX designer has done the job. They usually collaborate, and that's extremely useful. Like when you have a team with a UX and UI, you know that you're going to reach a great result because UI designer is as important as UX designer. Sometimes we think that UI designers are just focusing on, you know, just creating something pretty and that's it. But really, they have the knowledge of what works in terms of fonts, what works in terms of colors. Should we use an image? Should we use a video? What kind of illustrations should we include in our website? So they have a lot of really important choices to make. And I usually associate UI designers with the pizza chef. So they know how to do things and how to make a good pizza, but they follow the directions of the head chef. So again, collaboration between the two is not coming up with their own pizza recipes. They follow the head chef. And the digital designer is the one that sits in between the two. Like sometimes or agencies or companies don't have time, well, don't have budget to actually hire two separate people, like a UX designer and a UI designer. So sometimes they hire a digital designer, which is someone who knows how to read data, maybe do a bit of research, but not as deep as the UX designer. But this person knows how to put together a nice website, like collect the data, understand what works and what doesn't, come up with solutions via wireframes, and then design a website. I actually think it's quite a good job because you have the best of both. You can still be quite creative, and you have to think about the what's going to happen next, and how your choices will affect the results in this case, and how people will interact with what you design. Which is all well and good, but what does it take to actually start a career in digital design? Say, for example, you want to become a digital designer, and what skills should you have? Now, I have three answers for you. One is, well, be a Figma or XD or Sketch master. You have to be proficient in HTML and CSS. Or you need to have the right attitude and be open to learn new things, understand the process, and collaborate with others. Or the third answer is have a design degree in graphic design or similar, experience in product design, and a basic knowledge of JavaScript. So there you go, B. Someone else got a different opinion? Let's see. All right. Shall we see if B is the right answer? Let's have a look. Of course, it's B. And I think it's really important to understand that, sometimes skills like knowing how to use Figma perfectly or Sketch or knowing a bit of code, it's not really essential. And also, having a degree is not really fundamental. And for example, last year, we hired a midweight digital designer. And this person didn't have any specific degree. He was a self-taught designer. He was really into design. He started his career in branding. He was a freelancer. And then he got really passionate about Figma. He started to learn the software. And then, he came to the interview, just being extremely honest and said, look, I'm really passionate. I don't have a degree, but I really like design. That combined with his portfolio convinced us that he was the right person for the company, because he was really interested in what we were doing. And he was just generally really curious and open to learn. At the same time, focusing just on skills, like hard skills, like knowing a software. It's good, but you never know. Sketch really well, but then now Figma is the industry standard, so you have to learn new ones. So I think being able to adapt it's a really good skill to have. So if I have to be more specific in terms of like skills that can help you becoming a digital designer, I would say, there are 7 keywords that I managed to put together through the years. It took me quite a while because I had to really think about, what I've experienced in my career. And I've noticed that I always did these 7 things unconsciously, but they really helped me out. And I'm ready to share those with you. The acronym, it's easy to remember actually, is dullest. It's really hard to forget. But yeah, let's go through each letter. So the first one is D. Joe likes There's No Tomorrow. I really think that sitting down in front of your laptop and just start a new design is kind of difficult, especially if you're still exploring different options. You don't really know what kind of result you want to achieve. You want to try different things. I think that in that case, start designing your pages, even a website, on paper is extremely useful and liberating. So because you're not actually committing to anything specific, you can try different things, see what works. You can actually draw on top of what you draw already, and you can try different options and see what works. But when you're ready, you can just take the thing you've designed, you draw on your piece of paper, and put them on in Figma, for example. We have the next letter, which is U, which is understand that devs are not your enemies. Again, took me a while to understand that. But the truth is that we, sooner or later, as digital designers, UI designers, we will end up collaborating with developers, and they are the ones who will translate your static visuals to interactive websites or apps. Now, unless you are very specific about every single thing, devs will probably have to interpret some of your designs and come up with rules. And, they are not designers. Some of them have a bit of design background, but generally they really focus on the website and make sure that it works. It's quick to load and things like that. So our job is making sure that we're not working separately, and we really, as designers, we have to kind of understand their point of view as well. Like, why are they making specific choices? Can I help them out in terms of translating what I mean into an interactive page, for example? And there are different options. I think there is a really good website called codepen.io that allows you to try different things, and that website will give you the code for your developers. So find samples of things that you want to include in your website is extremely useful for us, but also for the developers as well, so they can actually understand what you want to do. L is learn the lingo. I don't think it's a fundamental skill to have from the start. And in fact, this is something that you will learn, on the go. But it's important to pay attention, I think, to the word that other people are using, especially when you get involved in the first meetings, in a company. So you hear other designers talking about H1 or maybe margins, Lottie files. At first, it's really confusing, and I was confused as well when I started working as a digital designer. But then I started to understand, and ask questions of what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And you don't really have to do it in a meeting. You can always, just sit down after the meeting and just ask the person, oh, sorry, I've heard you talked about paddings, but what is that? And again, as Sam said, there are no silly questions, really. If you don't know, the better thing you can do is just ask, or maybe, if you're shy, you can have a look online and find your answer, so you can use the right term next time, and people will understand what you mean by paddings instead of spacing, or what's an H1, for example, the main title on your homepage, and things like that. The next letter is leave it. This is my favorite. Leave it. And sometimes you have to do it. And by leave it, I actually mean two things. Leave your design to rest. Sometimes you have to do it. And that happens to me quite a lot, especially last week. I was working on a branding. I was struggling to find the right idea. So I decided to just take a break, have a walk, come back in, after half an hour with fresh eyes, and that really made a huge difference. And it's even better if you're able to, just finish for the day. It's 5 o'clock. You can just take a break, think about something else. You go to the gym, you take a walk, you walk the dog, you play video games, and then you come back to your designs the next day, and you will find yourself like with I don't know, a bit more inspired and a bit more open-minded, because when you sit down in front of your laptop, you can feel a bit too focused, and it feels like you have to come up with a solution because you're under pressure. Well, usually that's not the right way to come up with truly creative ideas. The second lever is understand where it's time to stop designing. And I think this is actually a really important skill to have, especially when you move from junior designer to midweight designer to senior designer. At some point, you understand that, of course, you can tweak your design forever. You can come up with something that's perfect, but you also have to think about deadlines. You have to think about the budget. You have to think about other people's expectations. And the reality is that if you work with a company, if you work in an agency, you will not have time to, tweak your designs forever. So learning how to exactly what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it, it's really important. And knowing where to leave, have I done enough? Have I reached a good enough result? Can I share it with the client and see, if there's something I can tweak, in the next phase? This is something that's really useful, and it's something that I think it's important to exercise. Especially, if you're working on a personal project, you can still do it. Just define your goals really specifically, and then try to design just the thing you have to, and add a few things if you have to, or just leave your design, or in this case your website, and see if it works. The next letter is experiment, which is, again, try new things is always good. And it's extremely useful, especially when you start to be a bit more confident in terms of like, okay, what are the basic modules in a website? But the problem with that is, if you follow the rule book, your designs will look a bit samey. It's always the same solution. It worked before. I'm going to use it again. But then people will start to notice and just ask you to do something slightly different. So again, it's important to, like, if you have time, to try something else. You've got your solution. That's good. Or try a different way to achieve the same result. Maybe try a different layout. Have a look at what other people have done, and see if you can come up with something that feels a bit more unique, or a bit more creative. And going back to the original point, pen and paper, again, good friends. If you want to try something new, but you don't really want to start designing things in Figma or in Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever, just use pen and paper. Just try and see, what works and what doesn't. And then we have S, which is share and get feedback. Now, I have to be honest, and tell you that I've always struggled with this. Sharing your designs can be quite difficult, because it feels like people are going to judge you. It's like, oh my God, I have to start again because, nobody likes it. And then sometimes you just keep it to yourself. But turns out that, especially if you work in a company, you work with other designers, chances are they've been through the same issues you had. Like, sometimes they struggle to find an idea, or maybe it took them a bit of time to actually come up with something really creative. So being able to just let it go and share it, share your ideas, share your sketches with other people. I think it's really good, and it can be very beneficial because then you can hear what other people think. And even if you're not sharing, or you don't have any designer colleague, or you don't know any other designer, I think it's really good to share your designs with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend, with your friends, especially if it's a website, because chances are the people that will use that website would be normal people, not designers. So maybe they will not care about colors, but they will care about, oh, where can I sign up? Where do I find the button? And things like that. So sharing your designs with normal people can be extremely beneficial. They will come up with feedback. They will come up with feedback that you probably have missed because you just focus on the beautiful things as a designer. And the last letter is T, which is test it, fix it, test it again, fix it again. Again, you tested your designs, you shared your design, you tested your design with other people, and you got your feedback. At that point, it's time to skim through all the feedback they gave you, and come up with new solutions. Maybe some of the feedback can be simplified. Some of the feedback can, of course, be ignored. But it's always important to, be fair with other people's feedback. And with software like Figma, you have the chance to create prototypes, which is really good. You can actually test the interactions. You can set up basically something that looks and behaves like a website, which is really good. You can click a button, you go on another page, or you can trigger an animation. You can test all these things, and you can share your prototypes with other people. Again, with potential users, as we said before. But the thing is, okay, fine, it's all good, but what if I don't know Figma? How can I do this? Can I share, or can I test my designs just on pen and paper? Well, of course you can. You can do that as well. And in fact, a lot of people do that with lo-fi wireframes on pen and paper, on paper, sorry. So they designed their page on a piece of paper, on an A4, really loosely. They create the buttons and everything, and they share those sketches with a potential user, and they ask them to go through page A to page B, and they literally ask the person to mimic, just to click on the paper to see how they will behave and how they will interact with the page. It seems a bit silly, but it is extremely useful, because that's something that you can test and fix quite quickly. So again, knowing a software or not knowing a software doesn't make a huge difference, really, if you cover all the basics. Even if you design a full website in pen and paper, that can be an extremely good start. And when I started my career as a digital designer, and I was trying to understand, how to put together a layout and things like that, what I used to do was to just grab a screenshot of a website I liked and just reproduce it, just draw it again on a piece of paper. And then, when I really understood the difference between, all the connection between all the modules and all the stuff on a page, then I redesigned them back in the day in Photoshop, and then in Sketch, and then now in Figma. And I think it's a really good exercise. It's like when you try to learn illustration, you start by copying, you get inspired, and then you come up with your own style. And well, this is basically it. I've put together a list of tools and resources that I think are really useful. In fact, I use them every day. In terms of design inspirations, if you're really into web design, I think Awards is one of the best websites. Then you have Dribble, which is a good. You probably know Drupal already, but if you're looking for inspirations in terms of like website design, but also illustration, icons, and design in general, Drupal is the place for you. Lapa Ninja, it's a really good website for landing pages. That's really inspirational because especially on a landing page, you have to make sure to include all the information in one page and make it look good. So I usually use that when I want to, when I'm looking to find like cool modules that I can include in my designs. And then you have Mobbin, which is like a collection of UI designs. In terms of tools, you probably know this already, but the industry standard nowadays is Figma. Then you have Adobe XD, which is the Adobe counterpart. Although now Adobe bought Figma, so they will probably become one thing pretty soon. Then we have Framer and Webflow. Now, these two software are very, very good if you want to learn web design and a bit of code as well. So in Framer and in Webflow, you can actually put together a full website without having to then code it yourself. Webflow and Framer will do it for you. And then you can actually see how it works, the code that gets created when you put together your visuals. It is really good, and I think Webflow especially is it will probably become industry standard at some point. And then you have CodePen, which is the website I mentioned before. Really useful if you want to find some inspirations or like some code snippets that are already done and they're doing things you want to replicate. CodePen is the website for you. And in terms of learning, you have the Awards Academy, the Designership, Domestika, Skillshare. Domestika and Skillshare especially, they're quite common. They're well known. Domestika is pretty cheap. You can find really good courses there. You have YouTube. That's a no-brainer. I use YouTube every day, especially when I'm looking for something specific. Can either be how to do something in Figma, or just some inspirations in terms of like branding as well. And then you have the UI glossary from the UX Design Institute, which I think it's a really good source, especially if you want to get a bit more familiar with the language and the words we use especially in UI design. And that's it. I think I talked quite a lot, and I would like to hear if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That's really great. We've just had our first question. Adriana is asking, would you like to tell us about your first design job interview?
Okay, well, this is actually quite interesting. So my first design job, the first design job I had was in Italy, but that was an internship, so I didn't really have to go through interviews. But when I moved to London 12 years ago now, I started to look for a design job, and a company got in touch with me. And back in the days, I had a printed portfolio together with a really small website. And I remember I was so shy, and I was not really sure what I was talking about. Again, because I felt like, maybe I'm not the right person for this job. And turned out, they were actually quite open-minded. And I remember at some point I said, well, guys, I like to work, I like to do illustrations and stuff like that, but I have no experience in, web design or game design. And they were actually looking for someone who could help them out, or help them with a game they were designing for the Cambridge University Press. So it was a 3D game for kids. And they wanted to find a designer who was able to come up with, sketches for the characters, and overall sketches for the whole game. And straight away I said, well, guys, I'm not sorry. It feels a bit a bit too much. But then one of the two people in the interview said, well, you know what, we like your style, so don't worry. Why don't we try for a week? You try for a week, see how it feels. If it's the right job for you, then great. Otherwise, it's good. It's all good. We're going to pay you for the weekend, and that's it. And I really felt like such a relief, because I thought, okay, fine. I've got nothing to lose. I can give it a go. And then yes, so started. I got really passionate, and the original contract was a 3 months contract just for the video game, and I ended up working with them for 3 years, which is really good. So and that's why, that's when I started to understand that, again, especially if you're a junior designer, having a specific experience, like in this case, I was not a game designer, never designed a game in my life. That was not what they were interested in. They really liked my, I don't know, my approach to a project. They liked the style, the illustration style, and in general, my personality. So I don't know, I think maybe I was lucky, but at the same time, I've noticed that, like, even in other interviews I had, the passion and, together with your unique style can make a huge difference. Software, things like that, you can learn those things while you work. And different companies have different ways of doing things. So you can bring something, and you can make a difference, as long as you can sell what your expertise. I hope that makes sense.
Fantastic. And we also have another question from Nicole. She says, in lieu of experience on our CV, what would help a junior stand out initially to land that interview?
That's a really good question. So I think, especially if you don't have a lot of experience or a lot of projects you can show, it's really important to, well, it's not really important, but you can show your personality. You can be quite, I don't know, I think sometimes people, when they put together a website or a portfolio online, they tend to make it look quite slick, quite cool, quite serious, which is fine. It's no problem with that. But then the risk is that you're going to look exactly the same as other people. Well, when I was hiring junior designers, midway designers, I got really impressed with specific things, like people being quite, I don't know, they have a bit of personality. Maybe they use a lot of colors, or maybe they're quite quirky in terms of the language they use. But they're not afraid of saying, well, I don't know everything, but this is what I know. It really shows that you are passionate about things, you have your own personality, and you can bring something different in the company. It's not really necessary. You shouldn't really have a lot of, or well, no, you shouldn't, but people don't expect to see a lot of case studies, especially from a junior designer. But what's nice to see is maybe projects that you did in your spare time, self-started, or things that you're doing for passion. Even better if you're working or collaborating with other company, pro bono works. That's good. It really shows that you have the passion for design. You want to do this thing, and you want to learn things. You're eager to become a designer. And yeah, I guess just in short, passion, bit of personality, and yeah, projects and case studies that really reflect what you want to do, but also reflect you as you as a designer.
Cool, thank you. Our next question is, where can we search for digital design jobs other than LinkedIn?
My favorite website is If You Could. Gonna type it. If You Could. That is the website of the cool agencies. You will find really cool jobs there. Because If You Could, I mean, it's a website that specifically design agencies are using, and I think I found the job at Velocity from If You Could. But just in general, if you're looking for something cool, I think that's a really good website. Then you have the Design Jobs Board. Design Jobs Board, I think it's .com. Again, really good for design jobs. And I think, now I don't remember the URL, but there you go. There is another website, sorry, that's called The Dots. And it's kind of a social channel for designers as well. And they have a jobs board as well. I think that's quite good, especially because in there you will find big jobs, small jobs, big agencies, small agencies. Maybe you will find a job as a freelancer. So you have like all sorts. Well, other website like just Design Jobs Boards, and If You Could, they're quite specific in terms of like company sizes and stuff like that. I didn't know this, but I actually found that out last year. Websites like Dribble and Behance, they have jobs boards as well. And they are actually quite flexible in terms of like working remotely. And those two websites specifically are dedicated to designers. So, again, if you want to find a cool design jobs, these are my suggestions.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is, for job interviews, are resumes important, or should you just show your portfolio?
I don't know if I should be honest here, but it really depends. It's always good to include a resume. I think it's fundamental, to be honest, even if you're a designer, because it's good to know your past experience. Have you worked before in an agency, for how long? But also like a list, having a look at like your soft skills as well, which, by the way, it's something that I would suggest including in a resume. It's not just about your previous experience. It's also about how, if you can be a good colleague, and soft skills, like a list of clear soft skills, can make or break, in my opinion. And that's something that I usually have a look at. The resume is probably the place where you add your experience in terms of software as well, which is really good. But as a designer, when I was looking for designers, I generally had a look at the portfolio first and the resume after. So again, I really want to see like the personality of the person, or like how is this person like putting together a website, and see what's interesting, what's curious about about the website or the projects. If I like the portfolio, then I go back to the resume and have a look at their past experiences. Also, if there are mismatches, and I think that's really important to make sure that you double check what you're saying, because sometimes especially in your bio, in your portfolio. You drop names, I've worked with this and that company, huge companies, but then you have a look at the resume, and those companies are not there. So, it's always good to be honest and really double check what you're writing. But going back to your original question, resume is quite important. Portfolio, in my opinion, is more important, but you should send both when you apply for a job.
Fantastic. And next question, great questions, by the way, guys. Do you guys know if there is a difference of salaries between UI designer, UX designer, and digital designer?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know the specific figures, but a UX designer, well, especially like when you become a senior, you can get paid really, really well, because although you have designer in the name, you're not really a designer. It's more about being able to do research and come up with solutions, which is quite complex. It's all about the data. It's less about colors, the beautiful things, the illustrations, the animations. It's quite a tough and intense job. But if that's your passion, UX design is definitely quite good, and it pays really well. If someone is just a UX designer, UI designer, I would say yes, you can get paid really well. If you're interested in becoming a UI designer, but you're just starting, I suggest considering a product design career, which is basically kind of like UI design, but you're actually focusing a bit more on apps. And nowadays, as you can imagine, with a lot of startups and a lot of companies that are just coming up every day, chances are you will be able to find a lot of jobs as a product designer rather than a generalist UI designer. There's nothing wrong with being a UI designer, but if the agency or the company, well, if they know what they're talking about, they will probably think that a UI designer is someone who can put together a website, and the website looks good. While a product designer is a bit more specific, you need to make sure you know how to put together an app. And put together an app is actually quite difficult, because you need to know how to design for an iPhone, how to design for an Android phone, for example, and things like that. So it gets a bit more technical. You are a bit more specialized. And I think it gets paid, product designer gets paid more than a UI designer. Digital designer, it's a fun job. And I'm currently a digital designer. I can't complain. But if you're truly a creative and what you care about is being able to take care of everything, like I want to get involved in branding, I want to get involved in animation, I want to know a bit of code, I want to design a website, then a digital design job is something that might work really well for you. I would say the salary is slightly lower than the previous three, because it's a bit more generic. The more generic you go, the lower the salary will be. But again, I'm not talking about you're gonna struggle. It's fine. You can build up your career and you can be perfectly happy. But the more specific you are, the more you will get paid, of course, because then at that point you will become an expert in a really specific area. The pro in being a digital designer is that you know a bit of everything. And if at some point you want to change your career, I want to focus on product design, I have less things to learn. Like if instead you are a UX designer and you want to become a UI designer, in that case, you have to learn quite a lot, because really you're focusing on data, and then you want to move on and design things, and that's quite difficult. So I think digital design offers a lot of flexibility. All the others are a bit more specific, but they get paid quite well.
Fantastic, thank you. Our next question is, do you have advice for your CV being plain and ATS friendly versus personality and well designed? As a designer, this is the one I never hear a clear answer for.
Again, it really depends on the kind of job you like, the kind of job you are looking for. In my personal experience, adding personality to your website, adding personality to my website was always the best choice, because people can actually see that it's not just I'm not just designing things, or I'm not just designing slick websites. Everyone can do that, but there's something else I can add. I can be a bit more creative. I can be a bit more, I don't know, just Italian in this case, a bit more myself. In my website is actually, on my website, I try to add what I like even illustrations and things like that. Use the kind of language that I usually use. I'm not sure if I'm swearing on my website, probably not. But again, I'm trying to be myself. And so far, I managed to find companies that are like myself. They are quite open. They are a bit more flexible, and they're just a bit more loose, which is what I like. If you like, there's nothing wrong in being quite serious, quite slick, quite clean, but that also means that you will probably attract those kind of companies. It really depends. I think the answer will vary depending on what's the kind of job and the company you want to attract. That's basically it. But if you ask me, then of course, don't be afraid of add your personality into your portfolio and your resume. In fact, I actually printed, when I was looking for the job, I printed my resume on a magazine. So that was just something else I can use to inject a bit of personality as well. So there are different ways to add personality.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually been got feedback from an employer recently, and they said that if they receive like a plain Word document kind of layout, black and white CV, they don't even look at it. If it's a Word document attachment to an email, they don't look at it. So yeah, I guess it depends on the application process, doesn't it, to some degree, what they're using.
Yeah. I mean, again, a web portfolio is your chance to really show who you are. Sometimes, again, yes, as you said, resume will be simplified even by the agencies. So they make it plain, so they don't really make any. I think they just make it plain, so they are fair with everybody. But if you have a website, or if you can put together a website, and nowadays it's so easy to put together a website. You can do it in WordPress. You can do it by using Adobe Portfolio. I think that's a good starting point. You can add a bit of yourself, and you can show that I'm Andrea, but I'm also a person. I have passions and I like other things. So there are ways to showcase your personality other than your resume, basically.
Okay, and we have another question. Is a UX UI designer position the same as a digital designer, or will they be kind of, I guess, listed as two completely separate jobs, or three?
They are usually separated. If you have a look, just as a test, you can just check on LinkedIn, and if you look for digital design jobs, you will find a variety of skills. They request UX jobs. You will start to see that they are actually quite similar in what they ask. The same thing for UI design. One thing that I would be careful about, because that happened to me as well. This is something that I mentioned at the beginning. Sometimes people mix the three. And that happens especially with recruiters. Of course, they're not doing this maliciously, but sometimes they will try to sell you as something you're not. Like, for example, when I got in touch with recruiters previously, they tried to convince me that I was a UX designer. And at some point, I started to believe I was a UX designer, just because I was able to design wireframes. But then they do it because they want to, get you hired. But you need to know what you're good at and what are your skills. So if that happens to you, really try to understand what are your real skills. Have I designed a wireframe before? Have I done a user research before? If the answer is no, then you're probably a UI designer. Or maybe the opposite is true. I never put together, like font style, color style, never design illustration, never design a website, but I know how to do my research. Then you're not a UI designer, so you should look for something else. So I think there's some confusion, especially within recruiters, with the recruiters. But in general, when companies are looking for UX designers, they have a specific set of skills. UI designer, they have a specific set of skills. Digital designer, it gets a bit blurry. Some of the skills might combine. They might ask you to put together a wireframe, but that's fine. Yeah, just be careful with recruiters. Some of them are good, some others.
Fantastic. Are there any last questions before we wrap up tonight? Thank you so much for all the questions that we've had so far. They've been really, really good. It's always really insightful, actually, to hear the questions that you ask.
Yeah.
To understand what information maybe isn't out there so much. So yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. We've come to the end of another Turn Heads event. I really hope you've enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you found this content helpful and you wish to support what we do, then please tell your friends about us and sign up to turnheads.com for more resources, the replays of all the events and the interviews that we do. And thank you so much to our special guest, Andrea, for sharing such brilliant tips and to help others achieve their creative career goals. So that's it from us tonight, but we shall see you at the next one. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.